There we go. Okay. So as I mentioned, the session is going to be a little bit more interactive for you guys. Today's icebreaker, in case you don't know what an icebreaker is, it's just a question I ask people. You can respond in the chat, or you can just unmute your mic. What is something you learned from the previous SAT sessions? So this is definitely tailored to the people that have been here before, but if you haven't been here before, that's okay. You can just share something you look forward to learning today. So if anyone wants to go first. You guys are shy today. That's okay. You can guys just type in the chat or just unmute. I'm looking forward to helping you guys learn how to use Khan Academy. I know we mentioned it a bunch of sessions like this whole time, but I'm sure it's a little confusing still. I'm sure some of you are still trying to like go into the process of making a Khan Academy account and seeing how that helps. So anybody want to unmute, share how they feel, or just type in the chat? Go ahead, Ted.
Hello. During those sessions, I really learned a lot of things. For example, I've had a small overview about the types of questions. We also covered those resources such Khan Academy, and I also appreciated those exercises of math, like practice together and in order to improve ourselves and also get a look about solutions.
Perfect. I'm glad it's been helpful for you. Anybody else, you can type in the chat or just unmute if you've been here before, and just tell me what is something you guys learned from previous sessions, or what is something you want to learn. If you guys are a little shy, that's okay. We'll ease into it. If you guys aren't sure yet, also no worries. We'll just get right into it. So here's a little, oh wait, we gotta chat. I want to understand the test and be ready for it. Perfect, exactly. That's what we're here for. We're here to help you prepare. So what is the SAT? So SAT stands for the Scholastic Assessment Test. It's an entrance exam used by most colleges and universities, especially in the US, to measure a high school student's readiness for college and to make admissions decisions. So the SAT has these 4 sections. We have reading, writing language, math, no calculator, and then math calculator. So today we're going to be focusing on reading. So what is the structure of the reading test? So essentially you're going to have 52 questions overall. There's going to be 4 text passages and 1 pair of passages that are read together. So how does that work? So you'll typically have a passage that's like a work of fiction from like it won't be a popular book. Like you're never going to find Harry Potter on your reading test. It'll typically be from a more older source. You'll also have 1 to 2 passages relating to the social studies document. Today, we're going to be going through all the different types. So if you're a little confused on some of these, no worries at all. The other passage is somewhat similar to the social studies, except I've also seen some psychology works be kind of blended in as the sort of scientific text. And as I mentioned below, you'll probably have a passage from any of the scientific works. So biology, chemistry, physics. Some of these will overlap, but there's also like a historical type of passage, which is what we mean by the social studies related document. And depending on your reading test, they'll come in different orders. So it won't be just like fiction, history, economics, biology. It doesn't always go in that order. Sometimes you'll have like a bunch of different passages in different orders. So maybe you'll get your science passage first. Completely normal. So you have those 52 questions, and you have to read the passages carefully and then answer the following questions. Now, if you've been here before, we've talked about a few strategies. We've mentioned how you can skim the passage, you can skim the questions, and then look for the details in the passage after you understand what the question is asking for. You also have to make note of the fact that all questions on the reading test are multiple choice. This does make the exam a little easier, especially if you're using like the strategy of like process of elimination, which can help find the correct answer. And then there's also multiple types of questions. Now, what do we mean by types? Yes, they're all multiple choice. However, there will be certain things to look for in the questions for each passage relating to the questions, and we'll help you through that. So you're going to have a full-on extensive look into the type of questions and the type of passages today for each type of passage we've just went over. And this is how we're going to help you guys prepare in terms of starting at Khan Academy, what to look for in Khan Academy to help you practice, and all of these resources we're giving you today can be found online. How did I find them? Google. You pull up a Khan Academy page and you'll find all of these passages. It's literally probably the best free resource or resource in general for practicing for the SAT. So here's more information, not just Khan Academy, but the College Board, which is the organization that essentially helps with SAT reading, is like this central place where you can find a lot of practice tests. This is how you can kind of practice reading. A lot of the knowledge of the reading material is not tested. You'll have 5 passages to read for 52 questions in 65 minutes. I also highly recommend you guys become familiar with literary devices and terminology. So let's say you don't know what a simile is, you might have to know for the reading test because you might be asked to. There's analogy, tone, mood, symbolism, all that fun stuff. So you guys will see some examples of that when we look through the passages and look through the videos today. And yeah, so I have a question for you guys. Woohoo! So you guys can use the chat function or just unmute. I'm asking you guys, have you used Khan Academy before? If you haven't used it, have you at least heard of it? So you guys can go right ahead and answer in the chat or just unmute. All right, we have someone, unfortunately, no. We have 2 yeses so far. Perfect. All right, you guys probably are kind of familiar with the structure of it. I knew about it, but never really used it. I know it though, I've never used it. Okay, the great thing for you guys, Khan Academy, completely free. You just gotta get an email, you gotta make a password, you gotta set up a study plan, and boom, Khan Academy is made. I know some people were asking me on social media, like, how can I, like, which study plan should I pick? There should be a section, if you scroll down a little bit when you make your account, that specifies testing prep and then SAT. You guys would select that. Unless you guys want something more general, you guys would just pick your current grade level, and that'll just help you study general concepts. However, specifically, if you want the study plan for the SAT, you'll make an account. It'll probably bring up a little pop-up asking, oh, when's your birthday, all that fun stuff. And then when it asks for your study plan, I know some of you guys asked me, you guys would have to scroll down a little bit to see the testing spot and click SAT. So I think it's great that a lot of you guys are already starting this. I know some of you guys are like not even like seniors yet. That's just to make sure when you guys do make a Khan Academy, you guys know what to expect. And I'll show you guys some of the testing resources on Khan Academy today. So here's the first passage we have. Now, I will share it with you guys once we're done going through the exercises, so you guys can look through it. You guys can look through the types of questions and we can walk through it. But thankfully, for every single passage we're doing today, we have a video to kind of walk you through how to look at the passage. So this is the first example passage. Now, remember I mentioned a lot of these passages, they don't come in a specific order. In this case, our first passage is a comparison passage, and it's science. So that's kind of what we mean by, as long as you can kind of expect the types, but not hope that you're going to get the same kind of passages every time, it'll help you guys get a lot better. So today, we're going to be reading 2 comparison passages. And the first one is called The Web Shatters Focus, Rewires Brains. And the other one is called Mind Over Mass Media. So just already before we started reading it, it's going to be some sort of comparison about the role of mass media or the internet. So just make sure you guys, if you guys are a little confused, or you start panicking seeing the passage, sometimes the titles reveal a lot about what to expect. So all right. I'm gonna stop sharing for a second so I can pull up the video. And remember, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. You can just unmute or raise your hand and we can get started. But we're gonna walk through a Khan Academy video together, and then I'll share the passage for you guys so we can kind of cross-check between the things that we're viewing. So everyone can see the video okay, I hope. I did press share sound this time, so should work. Anyways, close captioning. All right, let's start.
If you've taken a practice SAT, you've probably noticed that one of your reading tasks asks you about 2 passages paired together instead of just one. In this video, I'm going to look at one way to approach a set of paired science passages on the SAT. Instead of reading both passages at once and then diving into the questions, I'd like to do them one at a time. So my strategy looks like this. First, survey the questions, then read passage 1, then answer passage 1's questions, then read passage 2. Then I'd answer the questions about passage 2, then I would describe the relationship between those 2 passages, and only then would I go back and answer the questions that are about both passages. Now, remember that science passages on the SAT usually feature a new claim or hypothesis, along with research that supports it. Sometimes we also see discussion of the conclusions of the research and possible future questions that still need to be answered. Basically, there'll be a what section and a so what section that will get to the main point, and you might see a section about implications of the research, or in other words, a what's next section. So I'm going to start by reading the blurb, then I'll scan the questions, and only then will we read passage 1. Passage 1 is adapted from Nicholas Carr, author Nicholas Carr, The Web Shatters Focus, Rewires Brains. And passage 2 is Mind Over Mass Media. So from this, broadly speaking, I'm getting the idea that Carr thinks the web is bad. I'm just going to say web equals bad, question mark. Now, you don't have to make margin notes. You may not have time on test day. I'm just doing it to transmit my thought process to you, but don't take my notes as instruction. So, okay, so we got that. What does mind over mass media mean? Does it contrast with the first passage? It probably will, all things being equal. Paired passages are going to be at least in conversation about an idea. Maybe it's competing theories about the same thing, or 2 diverging stories about why something is the way it is. Carr says X, Pinker says Y. But right now, I don't have enough information one way or the other to figure out what that title means. Now, let's survey the questions. All this means is that I'm going to zip through the questions and see which are about each passage, whether any call out specific words or lines in the passage, and I'm not doing this to memorize the questions for later. I'm just priming my brain, trusting in the learning science that suggests that this pre-reading step I'm about to do will help me recognize these target phrases as I read a minute or 2 from now. What I'm saying is I don't want to spend a ton of time on this survey step. What I'm doing is essentially creating a roadmap to approach this passage. So if I feel like I'm short on time, I can do some of these questions as I read. Okay, so let's get to it. Question 1, the author of passage 1. Okay, so this is a passage 1 question. This is what I'm talking about. It's as quick as that, right? Question number 2 refers back to the previous question. Which choice provides the best evidence for the answer to the previous question? So this is also passage 1. We'll do these first. Question 3, the author of passage 1 indicates that becoming adept at using the internet, so maybe I'll keep my eyes open for the word adept. As used in line 33, the word plastic most nearly means, okay, so I'm going to go hop over into the passage and look for line 33 and look for the word plastic. 30, 31, 32, 33, highly plastic. Cool. I don't want to spend more time in the passage than I need to during this step. Okay, question 5, the author of passage 2, so now we're in passage 2 questions, refers to the novel War and Peace, primarily to suggest that Woody Allen. Okay, so I'll be looking for War and Peace and Woody Allen in passage 2. According to the author of passage 2, another passage 2 question, what do novelists and scientists have in common? Great. So let me go back and underline novelists and scientists. I'll think about that as I read passage 2. The analogy in the final sentence of passage 2. Okay, so this is probably our last passage 2 question. Has which effect? Cool. And now we're moving on to question 8, the main purpose of each passage. So this one's about both passages. So a question like this I will do at the very end. Which choice best describes the relationship between the two passages? So this is another both passage question. Question 10, on which of the following points would the authors of both passages most likely agree? Great, another one that I would do last. And it looks like question 11 is the last one. Which choice provides the best evidence that the author of passage 2 would agree to some extent with the claim attributed to Michael Merzenich in lines 34 to 37 in passage 1? So this is a question that compares both passages, and I'm going to go look really quick for the name Michael Merzenich in passage 1, lines 34 to 37. Doop-a-doop-a-doop-a-doop. Okay, oh, there we go. There's Michael Merzenich. Here's 34. And here's 37. Okay, great. And with that, our survey step, our pre-reading, is done. That didn't take me very long, and I think it took even longer, if I'm being honest, because I was reading aloud to you for the purposes of this video. So, with the pre-read accomplished, let's move on to our next step, reading passage 1. As we go, I'll be asking who is claiming what, what's the experiment and its findings, and what are the implications of those findings.
So we're going to take a little break here in case people have questions. I'm going to ask you guys, so just from the first 5 minutes alone, what are some things we picked up from what this guy's doing and how he started with these passages? Anybody want to share? Read the questions about each one and then get back at the passages. Good. What are some things he's looking for in those questions? I know you guys noticed how he was marking certain lines. I think one of them asked for something on line 34. What did a word mean? Goes back to circle it. So he knows what to identify when he reads back in the passages. And obviously it's not going to take you 6 minutes on the actual test to survey questions. He's talking out loud, but generally you should take no more than like a minute doing it. Because as you can see, I mean, it's not too many questions. You guys can fast read and skim through. So surveying should take about 1 minute and then go back to read. But when you're reading, remember you're looking at the specific parts the questions ask for, or the sections that you should be expecting to look at. Anything else that we noticed just from the first 5 minutes? I'll tell you guys some other things I noticed. So he mentions the roadmap. You'll notice how the questions usually go in chronological order. It'll go from passage 1 to passage 2, comparison between the two passages, and then some miscellaneous near the end. Or it'll just end at the comparison. So remember that when you guys are surveying the questions, do not do more than you need to. Remember, there'll probably be 3 questions for each passage and then 2 to 3 to wrap up both of the passages. So if you get lost, just make a note of that. And you won't have to read the entire passage like in immense detail. You can look for the stuff that answers those questions to save you time. So, does anybody have any questions? If you have any questions at any time, just bring up the chat or just unmute or raise your hand and we'll stop. But let's continue.
Okay, so passage 1, the web shatters focus, rewires brains. Here we go. The mental consequences of our online info crunching are not universally bad. Certain cognitive skills are strengthened by our use of computers and the net. These tend to involve more primitive mental functions such as hand-eye coordination, reflex response, and the processing of visual cues. One much-cited study, okay, so there's a study of video gaming, revealed that after just 10 days of playing action games on computers, a group of young people had significantly boosted, so I'm going to put some pluses there, the speed with which they could shift their visual focus between various images and tasks. Let's move on. It's likely that web browsing also strengthens brain functions related to fast-paced problem solving, particularly when it requires spotting patterns in a welter of data. A British study of the way women search for medical information online indicated that an experienced internet user can, at least in some cases, assess the trustworthiness and probable value of a web page in a matter of seconds. Okay, so here's another study. I'm also going to underline the word strengthens, brain functions. Okay, so web browsing strengthens certain brain functions like the fast ones. Okay, the more we practice surfing and scanning, the more adept our brain becomes at those tasks. The word adept reminds me of a question. I don't remember what the question was about. That's fine. On test day, I might peek over the questions and see if I can answer the relevant one right now, but I won't do that now. Let's keep going. But it would be a serious mistake. So this but is important. Serious mistake is a bunch of negatives, so I'm going to put some minus symbols there, but it would be a serious mistake to look narrowly at such benefits and conclude that the web is making us smarter. In a Science article published in early 2009, prominent developmental psychologist Patricia Greenfield reviewed more than 40 studies on the effects of various types of media on intelligence and learning ability. She concluded that every medium develops some cognitive skills at the expense of others. Okay, so there's a trade-off here. Our growing use of the net and other screen-based technologies, she wrote, has led to the widespread and sophisticated development of visual spatial skills. But, always look for transition words like but those gains go hand in hand with a weakening of our capacity for the kind of deep processing that underpins mindful knowledge acquisition, inductive analysis, critical thinking, imagination, and reflection. Yeah, wow, that's a big call out, right? So we're good at some stuff, but are we getting smarter? This Greenfield study suggests a couple of things. First, that getting good at the internet means losing ability at deep processing. So there's a trade-off. And second, it suggests that that trade-off itself is a bad deal. Losing processing power in exchange for speed is bad. We know that the human brain is highly plastic, and there's that vocabulary word that we circled in the survey step. If I was running short on time, I might just go and do this question right now, but I won't, since I'll be doing a separate video for that question later. Let's move on. Neurons and synapses change as circumstances change. When we adapt to a new cultural phenomenon, including the use of a new medium, we end up with a different brain, says Michael Merzenich, a pioneer in the field of neuroplasticity. So I think what he's saying there is what we do changes what our brains are. That means our online habits continue to reverberate in the workings of our brain cells even when we're not at a computer. We're exercising the neural circuits devoted to skimming and multitasking while ignoring those used for reading and thinking deeply. So overall, my take on this passage is that it's saying the web is wrecking our brains and making us bad at deep thinking, but making us good at making snap decisions and snap judgments, things that the author deems as primitive brain functions. So overall, web is bad. Now on test day, I would go through and do all the questions about passage 1, but I'll be breaking those down into individual worked example videos later. So in the meantime, let's press ahead with passage 2. Here we go with Mind Over Media by Steven Pinker.
Okay, so we just read through the passage, okay? Or he kind of read us through it. What are some things you guys noticed that he did while reading the passage? Anybody remember? All right, I'll refresh your memory. So you notice how he's identifying the same words that were from the past, like the questions for this passage. However, I should also note that you guys can probably see that he was underlining some certain words: strengthened, weakened. These are very argumentative words. If you're wondering what that means, argumentative is like very strong, very opinionated words to suggest the flow of an argument or an author's argument. So we noticed like it went from strengthened to suggest the main point of the passage, which is web bad, because making those sharp decisions are not as good as our ability for deep thinking and reading. Those are the types of things you guys want to look for when reading through a passage, because I know you guys might skim like the first two paragraphs here and be like, okay, this guy likes the web, but you guys missed the entire point completely. And I know people that miss the passage point completely, but you guys notice how he's paying attention to those transitions and the argument words. So he understands the argument completely well. So in just this video alone, he reads through it in like 4 to 5 minutes. You guys can do that, but not take as long, because he's reading it out loud, mind you. But I know you guys can read faster and underline and circle in the same way that he does. So you guys are already on the right track. He's already doing decent time, but just be mindful of that. This only took 4 to 5 minutes for him for the first passage. You guys, it'll probably take 1 to 2 minutes, which is crazy because you guys aren't reading it out loud. So does anyone have any questions so far?
Not from my side.
Not, we can keep going to passage 2.
Critics of new media sometimes use science itself to press their case, citing research that shows how experience can change the brain. Kind of sounds like Merzenich in that last paragraph of passage 1. But cognitive neuroscientists roll their eyes at such talk. I see. Okay, so I think I have an idea of how Pinker feels about passage 1 just from the jump. Yes, every time we learn a fact or skill, the wiring of the brain changes. It's not as if the information is stored in the pancreas. Oh, Stephen, you're so salty. But the existence of neuroplasticity does not mean the brain is a blob of clay pounded into shape by experience. Okay, so this basically sets up a direct contrast with passage 1. Experience does not revamp the basic information processing capacities of the brain. Speed reading programs have long claimed to do just that, but the verdict was rendered by Woody Allen after he read Leo Tolstoy's famously long novel War and Peace in one sitting. It was about Russia. Genuine multitasking, too, has been exposed as a myth, not just by laboratory studies, but by the familiar sight of an SUV undulating between lanes as the driver cuts deals on his cell phone. Okay, so here we've got Woody Allen and War and Peace. And I remember that there was a question about Woody Allen, so on test day I might go and see if I could tackle that question right now. War and Peace is, as Pinker writes, a famously long and also a famously complex book. It would be absurd to boil it down to a single sentence. Pinker is arguing that the brain isn't so malleable that you can transform yourself into the person who can read and comprehend War and Peace all at once. It doesn't matter if you've taught yourself to speed read, your comprehension will not be as good. And this is illustrated by the example of someone driving badly while talking on their cell phone. Moreover, the effects of experience are highly specific to the experiences themselves. If you train people to do one thing, recognize shapes, solve math puzzles, find hidden words, they get better at doing that thing, but almost nothing else. Music doesn't make you better at math, conjugating Latin doesn't make you more logical, brain training games don't make you smarter. Accomplished people don't bulk up their brains with intellectual calisthenics, they immerse themselves in their fields. Novelists read lots of novels, scientists read lots of science. I remember there was a question in the pre-read that was about novelists and scientists. If I was tight for time on test day, I might just head over and try to find and do that question now. I would say that the point of this paragraph is saying that specific experience is more important. If you're good at solving a Rubik's Cube, it doesn't make you better at writing history papers, it makes you good at solving a Rubik's Cube. So this is in contrast to passage 1 that says if you play a lot of video games, it's going to make you worse at doing research. The effects of consuming electronic media are likely to be far more limited than the panic implies. All right, so Pinker's saying it's not that bad. Media critics write as if the brain takes on the qualities of whatever it consumes, the informational equivalent of you are what you eat. As ancient peoples who believed that eating fierce animals made them fierce, they assume that watching quick cuts in rock videos turns your mental life into quick cuts, or that reading bullet points and online postings turns your thoughts into bullet points and online postings. So this feels like it's in contrast to the Merzenich. So maybe the overall point of this passage is you aren't what you eat. At this point, I'd go through all of the passage 2 questions, and only then would I swing around to the final questions about both passages. And in preparation for that, I would compare the 2 passages. So let's do that right now. So if the point of passage 2 is you aren't what you eat, well, then the point of passage 1 is that you are what you eat. According to the first passage, the things your brain takes in do shape your brain, and according to the second passage, they don't. And with that basic understanding in mind, approaching the questions about both passages suddenly becomes a lot more manageable. Summarize each paragraph as you go along, like I did in this video. Rephrasing the main points of each paragraph in your own words will strengthen your understanding of the passage as a whole. Good luck out there.
Kind of funny, huh? These passages just kind of were all over the place. I'm gonna check if I'd be able to give you guys the passage that was from the video so you guys can look through it on your own time. Yeah, okay, found it. I'm gonna give it to you guys right now. Woohoo! There we go. There we go. So you guys in the chat should see the file that I just attached. It includes both passages and it includes the questions following up for each of these passages. So if you guys want to look back and answer these questions on your own after the knowledge, we just got today of the strategies we learned, you guys can absolutely do that on your free time. If you guys have any specific questions on the passages we just went through or the strategies, then do let me know. Until then, yeah, does anyone have any questions about some of the things we went over in this first video for the science portion of the reading test? I think it was pretty self-explanatory. I'm going to share my screen just again so we can reiterate some of the strategies we learned. So, woohoo. So we learned here to kind of skim the questions before we go to the passage. Once we get to the passage, we dig into it more carefully, we're reading actively and asking ourselves the questions before. You can obviously go right ahead. If you come across the point you remember from the question, just go right ahead and answer it. You don't have to wait till the very end. Also, typically, you saw he made some notes. You don't have to if like you're short on time. Mental notes help, or just quick little markers so you know the complete idea of both of these passages in a comparison. So, like he did in the video, he circled some important words, underlined some important transitional / argumentative words or phrases, and he made some quick notes on what each passage was about, if they were in direct contrast with one another or if not. And if you guys remember, yes, the second passage rips into the first passage. So we're not judging you guys on like whether you agree on which passage or not. It's simply if you can articulate what is being said in either passage and use that to answer the questions. So the next one is passage 3. This is like our literature kind of fiction part of the SAT reading. So it's called A Strange and Sublime Address. So you guys are probably wondering what that's about. Honestly, I have no clue what it's about either, but we're going to read through it. Woohoo. So what strategy are we going to be looking over here? We're going to do the thing we mentioned before, the surveying, though it's going to be a lot faster this time. And it's literature. So you guys might notice some differences between the things we identified in the science. The science was more argumentative. Literature is more narrative. So it's not so much necessarily an argument. It's more so about the details and what's happening in the plot. So keep those in mind when you guys are taking notes right now. He's going to walk you through this next passage. And of course, after, I'll send you guys a PDF of this passage so you guys can look over the questions on your own time. And then hopefully you guys, after you guys work through those questions, can ask us about them in the SAT Prep WhatsApp group, which I will send you guys. Don't worry. I know some of you guys are already in there, but just to make sure. Let's go.
Passage on the SAT reading test. Literature passages offer a slightly different challenge than the other passages do. In the science and social studies passages, we focus on arguments, and we look for the points that the authors are making with topic sentences, which often make claims and which are then supported with evidence. But literature is a little different. Instead of focusing on arguments supported by evidence, we need to focus on narrative elements like setting, plot, and character. And setting is about the where and the when, plot includes the what and the how, and the characters are the who. This can make literature passages difficult to skim effectively because their structures can vary so much. For example, sometimes there's dialogue between characters, and the paragraphs you find in stories are way less likely to have clear topic sentences. However, it can still be helpful to take a quick look at the blurb and the questions before digging deeper. To illustrate this, we're going to approach this literature passage with a modified version of a popular strategy called SQ3R, which stands for Survey, Question, Read, Recite, and Review. If you like this method, we encourage you to practice it and work it into your approach on test day. In this video, I'll focus on the first two steps, Survey and Question. In the survey step, I'll read the introductory blurb and skim through the questions, but I'm not going to try to skim the entire passage. For the reasons I mentioned earlier, a lot of students find that a skimming step is not a good use of time on literature passages. However, students often find that just surveying the questions gives them a rough idea of the overall shape and focus of the story. So after this survey step, I'll quickly ask myself about what might happen in the story, which will prepare my brain for a closer look at the passage. I'll be doing this way slowed down for instructional purposes, but this process can be completed very quickly. With practice, many students find they can complete this step in about a minute for literature passages. That leaves them with about 12 minutes to work through the passage, one big chunk at a time, and answer some of the questions as they go along. So, that's the goal. Let's get started with that introductory blurb. And the blurb is very important. Don't skip the blurb because it gives you all sorts of important information. So, this passage is adapted from Amit Chaudhry, A Strange and Sublime Address. Copyright 1991 by Amit Chaudhry. A 10-year-old boy named Sandeep travels with his mother, his aunt, Mamima, and his uncle, Choto Mama, to visit family in Calcutta, India. Alright, so already we've got at least 4 characters, Sandeep, his mother, his aunt, Mamima, and his uncle, Choto Mama. And it takes place in India. Cool. That's our blurb. let's not even look at the passage. Let's move over to the questions. All right, question 1. According to the passage, the old man was standing on the veranda because... Cool. So for this, I'm going to underline veranda, and then later as we're going through the passage, when we come across the veranda, we'll just circle it. This is just asking us why the old man was standing on the veranda. Okay, question number 2. In the passage, the yogurt and the sweetmeats are compared to... Cool. So again, this is another keyword kind of question. So as we go through the passage, we'll be looking for yogurt and sweetmeats, the mentions of that. Question 3, as used in lines 33 and 35, air mostly means, okay, let me dip over to the passage, look for lines 33 and 35. Okay, there's line 30, 31, 32, 33, air. Gonna underline that. 34, 35, air again. And that's question 3. I'm going to put that in the sidebar. All right. Question 4, the character's behavior during the gift giving. Okay, so we're going to be on the lookout for when gift giving happens for question 4. Question 5 is looking for textual evidence for the answer to question 4. So we'll be on the lookout for that as we go through. Question 6, the description of Chotomama and the son's interaction mainly serves to... Okay, this is going to be a question about the purpose of the description of something. So we're going to be, this is a craft question, so we're going to be doing a close read when Chotomama and the son interact. Over the course of the passage, Sandeep comes to view the adults as something. So, okay, so view signals to me that this is going to be a POV question. That is to say, a point of view question. Because we know from the blurb that Sandeep was the character who was mentioned first. He's probably the protagonist of the story. So we're going to be looking for the way his point of view changes, or an opinion that he expresses. Similarly, in question 8, Sandeep would be most critical of which action in the passage. Okay, so we're going to be looking again for things that Sandeep has opinions about, maybe critical opinions about. Question 9, which lines from the passage most strongly suggest that India has experienced social change? Okay, so we're looking for proof of social change in India, and lines that indicate. And finally, a vocab question, as used in line 61, impression most nearly means something. So let's hop over to line 61 and underline it. There's line 60, there's line 61, and there's the word impression. Let me just mark this with question 10, and then that's it. Now look, the purpose of this step is not to keep all of those questions actively in your head at all times. It's do not feel like you have a responsibility to memorize these questions, but I will say it is really impressive what your subconscious holds on to. The purpose of this is just to survey and get a broad map of what the questions are asking. It's not to memorize the question. So if that's a concern of yours, I would urge you to put it aside. I don't know that there's much else that we can do with this passage right now, except to...
All right, pop quiz, guys. Okay. So shorter video than the other ones, but do you guys remember what the SQ3R stands for? I had to check who's paying attention, bro. We'll go over it if you don't remember, but try to guess, at least in the chat or unmute. I think this is a pretty good strategy for literature passages in general. Obviously, you don't have to like memorize it for like verbatim, but anybody remember? At least if you remember at least one of the parts. Yeah, okay. Review was one of the R's. Also, it's 3R. So there were 2 other R's a part of review. Review is one of them. What else did the other letters stand for here? In fact, what was he doing just now? Read and recall. Okay, let's check. Let's check again. We're gonna go through this part again.
Which stands for survey, question, read, recite, and review.
You guys see it on the closed caption. Okay. The step he was just doing right now, it's survey and question. Survey means you're looking through the questions, so those parts go hand in hand. Survey is like you're gauging what you should be looking for in the passage. Pietro, you were so close. Recite was actually the other one, but you got read. Lisa, you got review. You guys, I think, got the idea already. In this step, we were just doing the survey question part. What you guys would do after the survey question part, you guys would read the passage, recite what you know from the passage onto the questions, and then review on any parts you don't understand. So that's kind of the principle of the SQ3R. What are some other things you guys noticed that he did differently with the literature passage as opposed to the other one we just did? You guys know? Or in fact, maybe you guys remembered some similar stuff. What do you guys notice through this video? Do you guys want me to help you out? Or you guys got this? Okay, good, Lisa. Focus on some important words of the questions. That's definitely similar across all your reading strategies for each passage. What are some other things you guys noticed? Does the video go like a little too fast for you guys? Like I could slow down the speed a little bit if that would help. Just let me know. Reading the description. Yeah, go on. So we kind of brushed a little bit on it in the last one, but for literature, I highly emphasize you guys look at the description to identify first. He brought up 3 things. I know you guys remember. Literature passages are different from the other types of passages because, like the science and social science ones, it's usually an argument. So you guys are like analyzing through for the argument and the main like points of that argument. Literature, it's a little different. This one is like a plot. It's like a story. So there's nothing arguing. So you might have to focus a little more on your literature passages just to make sure you're not skimming and being like, I memorized the wrong thing. You don't want to be like that. So the 3 things that happen that you're going to be looking for in the literature passages. Remember, he mentioned setting. Remember, he mentioned plot. Anyone remember the last one? The last one we were able to identify just from reading the description alone. It's character. I helped you guys a little bit. We can tell the characters just from this description alone, which is why absolutely we read the description in these passages. So what's different about the literature passage, we have a new strategy, the SQ3R. We also have the SPC. We're looking for setting, plot, and character. So then when we go back to the questions and it's asking about like what happened at this interaction? Oh, well, now you know. When you're reading again, you identify, oh wait, Chotamama is having the discussion with Sandeep. This is the part where I'm looking for. This is the part where I'm looking for Sandeep's point of view. So when you guys quickly identify those things, it makes your job so much easier. And also I think like, if I'm being honest, I feel like literature is like the hardest passage in the reading test, just because it's a different structure than the other ones. But with these strategies, it makes it a lot more like digestible. And let's say you like go through the science and social science ones way faster. You guys can dedicate more time to the literature part because it'll be a completely different structure. And you're gonna be looking for different things than the argument ones. So does anyone have any questions so far about the structure of the literature passage, or just the strategies we've just gone over. Everything's good? Okay. I'm going to share with you guys the passage. There we go. Okay, so you guys can look over the questions in your own time. And as I mentioned again, when you guys work through these problems, make sure you guys like ask us any questions you have about the questions themselves, and we'll help you through answering them. But generally through these strategies, it makes it like a lot easier, I think, to answer the questions. Unless the SAT is being annoying and it's like a trick question, which they obviously do a lot. But reading, I don't think so as much as like math, because I feel like math, they throw in a bunch of like random outlier information that you're probably not going to figure out more so. But we will cover that in our math section. So attach the PDF for this passage. Make sure you guys look over it, ask us any questions, and yeah, we'll get on to the next part. Yay. Okay, well, we're going to go over this part again, just so you guys have the strategies in your head. We learned about something called the active reading step. Similar as setting, plot, character, but you guys can also call it the who, where, and what. Same thing. Who is character, where is setting, what is plot. Similar concept. We also mark up the passage, help us keep track of the characters, the relationships, what's happening, where are they, and then the survey step. So for many literature passages, many students find it helpful to read the blurb and then skim the questions, highlighting important words and line references. Then they dive straight into a close reading of the passage. So what's a close reading? Remember Skim? You're just tracing over the sentences, kind of getting the gist, or like some of the surface level ideas. Close reading, you're intensely following through the sequence of the passage, making notes, and you truly are trying to comprehend it. It will take more time to do a close reading than a skim, but doing a skim beforehand will help your close reading be more impactful because you'll know what to pay attention to more often than not. So, yay! I know you history buffs are gonna be super excited about Edmund Burke. Fun fact. So when you guys get accepted to UChicago, you guys read Edmund Burke in the social sciences classes. I know in my power class, we had to read Edmund Burke, and I was like, you get sick of it when it's the first time. Like, it's not that fun. It's very dense, but I'm kind of surprised they do it for the SAT. It's definitely in line with like some of the college stuff you guys will be doing. So we're going to look in the history passage, see how it's different, how it's the same. Remember, if you guys have any questions, just raise your hand or say in the chat. I'll pick it up immediately. And yeah. Let's learn about the revolution in France, guys. Okay, let's go.
We're looking at the history part of the SAT reading section. I want you to imagine it's test day, and you turn the page only to see this scary-looking passage sitting here. I mean, look at this thing. 3 huge, fat, dense paragraphs full of intimidating 18th century language.
If you guys read through this, all right, on your passage, you guys can flex. You guys are as big brain as a UChicago student because, fun fact, a lot of colleges don't actually read through the entire books of these. You definitely do at UChicago. So if you can like go through all of these, answer the questions, boom, You're like big brain, better than Harvard students, better than Yale students. Pat yourself on the back. Plus, it's probably going to be in a language that's not your first language. So automatically, you guys are probably noticing there's some big words here, but we're going to walk through it. It'll be super easy. Trust me.
So what do? You take a deep breath and walk through the steps. We are going to take control of this passage by being careful and methodical. I'm not scared of you, the past. Here's the plan. First, I'll read the blurb. Then, I'll skim the questions for targets and map out the passage. This will enable me to tackle the passage in big chunks, doing questions as I go along. So, okay, step one, let's go back to the passage. Read the blurb. This passage is adapted from Edmund Burke, Reflections on the Revolution in France, originally published in 1790. Edmund Burke was a British politician and scholar. In 1789, so the previous year, the French formed a new governmental body known as the National Assembly, ushering in the tumultuous period of social and political change, I'm going to underline tumultuous, known as the French Revolution. Okay, this is just loaded with helpful information. So Edmund Burke, this British guy, is going to be giving us his perspective on how France's new government, this National Assembly, is doing. He's writing this in 1790, and the assembly was formed, it says, in 1789, so just the previous year. The blurb also gives us this notion that it's tumultuous, messy, noisy, stormy. So maybe it's not going so great, since it leads, after all, to the French Revolution. Okay, the next step is to skim and survey the questions. So I'm going to see if there's anything to be gleaned from a super quick skim through the questions. I'm going to underline key words in those questions and mark things in the margins, making what we call a map of the passage. So watch as I go. I'm going to do this with an extremely light touch. Okay, first question, question 33. It can reasonably be inferred from the passage that Burke is upset with the National Assembly's decision to blank. I'm going to take a look at this one after maybe I read that first big fat paragraph, so I'm going to underline particularly upset. Next. Question 34 is asking for evidence for the previous question. Okay, so I'll come back to this later. Question 35, as used in line 17, I'm going to look for the word instruments, and then I'm going to move on. 15, 17, instruments. There we go. Moving on to question 36. Based on the passage, Burke believes that French leaders who would advocate moderate positions are blank. Here I'm going to underline the word moderate positions. Question 37, as used in line 30, the word sober most nearly means blank. All right, so I'm going to look for line 30. There's 30. There's the word sober. Going to underline it. Move on to question 38. Burke's central claim in the last paragraph. So let's find that last paragraph and put a big old bracket around it. That's a long paragraph. All right. And that's all we're going to do with that for now. Question 39. Burke refers to the repair of a building in line 70 to 72. So let's go to that line call out. 70 to 72. There he is mentioning the building. And it wants to know what the purpose of that is. So I'm going to just write why in the margin. Why did he do it? What's the point he's making? And then question 40. In the passage, Burke displays the greatest respect for which of the following? Okay, got to read the whole passage to understand this one. And question 41 needs me to find support for question 40, the previous question. That's all I need to do in this step. Let's move on. Question 42, last question, has a line reference in lines 76 to 77, and let's underline those looking for the words gentleman of France. 75, 76, the gentleman of France. And we're done. If you do that skimming step right, it should take you less than a minute, and you're ready to dig into the passage. Remember, as you read, you're looking for big picture ideas. I'm looking for central claims, and I'm not going to worry too much about the supporting details right now. Okay, ready? Let's do this. Now,
All right, I'm stopping it before we get into it. Does anyone have any last big questions before we dig right into it? I mean, if you've probably peeked at the passage already, I know it's a lot. Even you Chicago students don't understand Edmund Burke. But it's just a short passage. So Does anyone have any questions with this first step? You guys are already experts at surveying, so I imagine it's okay for you guys so far. All right, we got a thumbs up. All right, remember you can always raise your hand. I'll stop and we'll go through it. But Edmund, Burke, let's go, boy. Let's go.
I'm going to throw in a quick question step. If I head to the passage with a question, it can help my brain get interested in the answer. So I'm going to go back up to the top, and I'm going to ask myself, what does Edmund Burke, think of the NA, the National Assembly? Let's find out. This is going to be interesting. So now we're going to do step 3 from our strategy, which is tackle the passage in big chunks. Let's begin. First paragraph. To make a government requires no great prudence. Settle the seat of power, teach obedience, and the work is done. To give freedom is still more easy. It is not necessary to guide, it only requires to let go the rein. But, and I always underline words like but, to form a free government, that is, to temper together these opposite elements of liberty and restraint in one consistent work, requires much thought, deep reflection, a sagacious, powerful, and combining mind. This I do not find in those who take the lead in the National Assembly. Burke is not impressed with the National Assembly. I'm going to put some minus signs here to show that Burke is not impressed. This is a negative impression of the National Assembly. Perhaps they are not so miserably deficient as they appear. I'm going to put another minus sign there. That's sort of a backhanded compliment. Maybe they're not so terrible. I rather believe it. It would put them below the common level of human understanding. But, and again I'm going to underline this but when the leaders choose to make themselves bidders at an auction of popularity, their talents in the construction of the state will be of no service. They will become flatterers instead of legislators. The instruments, and there's that word for a question later, the instruments, not the guides of the people. If any of them should happen to propose a scheme of liberty, soberly limited and defined with proper qualifications, he will be immediately outbid by his competitors, who will produce something more splendidly popular. All right, so Burke doesn't like things that are popular. Suspicions will be raised of his fidelity to his cause. Moderation will be stigmatized as the virtue of cowards, and compromise as the prudence of traitors. Until, in hopes of preserving the credit which may enable him to temper and moderate on some occasions, the popular leader is obliged to become active in propagating doctrines and establishing powers that will afterwards defeat any sober purpose at which he ultimately might have aimed. Dang. So Burke does not like the National Assembly. He's saying that the leaders of the National Assembly are instruments of the people, which Burke says is bad. Right? He describes this as an auction of popularity. He's saying that this kind of populism results in spectacle rather than sober, sensible ideas. He's saying that the National Assembly in France generates clickbait. So let's sum this up by saying Burke's view of the National Assembly is mob rule by clickbait. Because remember, he's saying any moderation or compromise will be seen as cowardice.
Okay, we just literally went through half the passage. Okay, do you guys understand the argument so far in this big chunk? It's okay if you guys don't, but let me know, like, okay, are you following this guy's like thought argument, or is this like really difficult for you guys? Were there any parts you guys had like a hard time following through? Okay, we'll keep going then.
Or treason. Yikes. Now listen, on test day, I'd stop here and try to answer all the questions relevant to this first paragraph. That's questions 33 through 37. The information is fresh in my mind, and I could hop right in and go through those questions quickly. I'm going to keep pushing through now, though, and I'm going to break those questions into individual videos later on to showcase the skills and strategies needed to tackle them. All right, let's keep going with paragraph 2. But am I so unreasonable as to see nothing at all that deserves commendation in the indefatigable labors of this assembly? So Burke is saying, like, surely I should be able to say, like, one nice thing about the National Assembly, right? So I'm going to put a little plus sign with a question mark. I do not deny that among an infinite number of acts of violence and folly, some good may have been done. I'm going to put a little, like, kinda plus here. They who destroy everything certainly will remove some grievance. So I think what he's saying is, like, they may have thrown the baby out with the bathwater, but there might have been some bad stuff in that bathwater. I'll give them that. They who make everything new have a chance that they may establish something beneficial. To give them credit for what they have done in virtue of the authority they have usurped, or which can excuse them in the crimes by which that authority has been acquired, it must appear that the same things could not have been accomplished without producing such a revolution. Okay, so let's say you really have no idea what this guy is talking about. That's okay. And to prove it to you, I'm just going to keep on going. It may be that all I need to know is the overall gist of this paragraph. I can let the harder, more confusing sentences just wash over me, as long as I have a general sense of what he's trying to say. Most assuredly, they might. Some usages have been abolished on just grounds, but they were such that if they had stood as they were to all eternity, they would little detract from the happiness and prosperity of any state. The improvements of the National Assembly are superficial, their errors fundamental. Oh, thank goodness. So that final sentence helps me feel better that I might not have understood any of what was said in the last few sentences, but that final sentence of the paragraph really encapsulates it for me. So he's saying here that the ends didn't justify the means. Whatever superficial good they may have accomplished has been achieved unjustly. There is a central flaw. The error is fundamental. Now listen, Burke is using a high-flown style of language that was a lot more common 2 centuries ago. Longer sentences, flowery vocabulary, but one aspect of that language is that Burke tends to repeat himself a lot. He makes the same points multiple times throughout a paragraph. So even if you struggle with an individual sentence, the most important thing is to get the overall idea. So I'm going to put like a little question mark here, but then at the end, it's just all negative, right? I'm going to summarize this paragraph by writing, revolution not worth the cost. All right, final paragraph, paragraph 3. Whatever they are, I wish my countrymen rather to recommend to our neighbors the example of the British Constitution than to take models from them from the improvement of our own. All right, so that's really our topic sentence here. He's saying that France can learn from Britain rather than the other way around. And let's see why that is. Why does he think that's so? In the former, and here he's referring to the British Constitution, they have got an invaluable treasure. He's saying the British Constitution is an invaluable treasure. They are not, I think, without some causes of apprehension and complaint, and they here, I believe, refers to my countrymen, as in other people from Britain, are not without some causes of apprehension or complaint, but these they do not owe to their constitution, but to their own conduct. I think our happy situation owing to our Constitution, but owing to the whole of it, and not to any part singly, owing in a great measure to what we have left standing in our several reviews and reformations, as well as to what we have altered or superadded. Our happy situation, he's saying Britain, is good. Our people will find employment enough for a truly patriotic, free, and independent spirit in guarding what they possess from violation. He's saying he likes Britain the way it is. I would not exclude alteration neither, but even when I changed, it should be to preserve. I should be led to my remedy by a great grievance. In what I did, I should follow the example of our ancestors. I would make the reparation as nearly as possible in the style of the building. So I'm going to underline the example of our ancestors. I'm getting this sense of like preserving, conserving, doing stuff in the old way, repairing rather than renovating a building. A politic caution, a guarded circumspection, a moral rather than a complexional timidity were among the ruling principles of our forefathers in their most decided conduct. So again, all I'm getting from the sentence is careful, 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 careful. Not being illuminated with the light of which the gentlemen of France tell us they have got so abundant a share, they acted under a strong impression of the ignorance and fallibility of mankind. Kind of snarky, Edmund. He's saying the French claim to be like super, super smart, And that despite this, the British persevered even without being bathed in that light, and made a government system that anticipated that people would be fallible or ignorant. I think it's important to note here that people in the past were also sarcastic, also told jokes. Just because it's old doesn't mean it can't bring the heat, you know? All right. He that had made them thus fallible rewarded them for having in their conduct attended to their nature. Let us imitate their caution, if we wish to deserve their fortune or to retain their bequests. Let us add, if we please, but let us preserve what they have left. And standing on the firm ground of the British Constitution, let us be satisfied to admire, rather than attempt to follow in their desperate flights, the aeronauts of France. So I'm going to underline a couple things about this last sentence. So let us add, but let us also preserve. We are on firm ground with the British Constitution, and the French are like aeronauts, like balloonists or people attempting to fly. And remember, this is the 18th century, so...
We're gonna stop here because we just finished the passage, and you guys are either varying between, I have no clue what happened here, or like, okay, I kind of get a gist. I think this dude's narration helps a lot with like understanding Burke's argument. But reminder, if you don't have like any sort of clue of what we just talked about, that's perfectly normal. That's the point. Some people will find literature harder, some people will find history harder. And you'll notice here in this history passage, he's marked down a lot more stuff than before, right? Because this is a very dense reading. You're reading something that like college second years read, which is funny because I feel like the rest of the SAT is like an appropriate level for a high schooler. And then you just get a book from like Edmund and Burke, and it's like, I don't know what's going on here. And this type of passage would take like a whole class section for college students to digest. You guys don't have to do that. You guys just look at the general key arguments and then answer the questions. So I'm going to ask again, is there any part of this passage you guys want me to clarify or explain? Because I have read this book. I do understand the, I guess, background of Burke. I'm not necessarily agreeing or disagreeing, but I do understand the argument. So does anyone have any questions about anything from this entire passage? It's okay if you do. Were there any specific parts you guys had like difficulties understanding? Okay, well, if anything comes up, let me know. But yeah, we just read through this whole passage. This one might also take you a bit, but reminder, when we, capitalize on surveying the questions and we identify key parts, it makes this passage like so much easier, right? Some parts here you don't even have to like focus on. Like there was a word like sagacious, and you're probably like, what the heck does sagacious mean? First, you have the context clues of the words around it, which are going to be synonymous with that word. And also, you don't need to know the word sagacious unless it's specified in the question. I don't even know what the word sagacious means. You won't need to know that. So yes, it's really intimidating, but as you guys can see, it's like a lot more digestible this way. And I would probably like still use this video to help me read with other passages, because I know for sure like dense stuff like this, I struggle with, as do most people. But you guys are big brain and we don't have to struggle. So let's just watch like the last minute.
There weren't planes. This final sentence really summarizes the main idea. It gets at the whole point of Burke's argument. The British Constitution makes the country stable, and while France is experimenting with new forms of government, he thinks it's better to sit on the sidelines and watch than imitate them, because it's sort of like watching somebody failing in slow motion. I'd like to summarize this last paragraph as, Britain is good the way it is. He's saying that cautious change in small steps should only happen when serious problems arise, and that France is heading off in a wild, unpredictable direction. Okay, so we finished the passage, and now I'm ready to head to the questions. Let's review my strategy. As you read, you should be looking for positives and negatives. Also, always be looking for contrast and continuation words like but or therefore. These words will help you get the shape of a writer's argument. Where and how do they make contrasts or transitions in the passage? Always try to sum up each paragraph in your own words as you go along. If you're feeling lost, you can usually get the gist from the first and last sentences in each paragraph. That's a great place to identify topic sentences or summary sentences for each individual paragraph, and for the passage as a whole. Remember not to get bogged down in the quicksand of fancy vocab words. Chances are pretty good that an important idea will be conveyed multiple times in multiple ways. So stay calm and stay flexible. Good luck out there. You've got this.
Boom, made easy. So I'm going to keep this up for a little bit so you guys can take notes of the active reading strategy. We also talked about like the contrast continuation words already, but of course we mentioned the positives and the negatives so we can understand the flow of his argument. If it helps you guys, when you guys read in those big chunks, kind of like, make your little summary. You don't have to write like a whole other paragraph, just so you can like be like, okay, he likes this or doesn't like that. Boom. And then the last part, like, you're going to do worse if you like panic. As long as you get the gist, I feel like perfect. You guys are on the right track. So that's the history passage. A lot more dense than the other two. But if you think about it, it's like a really similar structure. So I'm going to send you guys the document for that one. Just give me a sec. Anybody have any questions? If not, let's get to the last part. I know you guys are probably getting antsy right now. It's okay. Well, we got about like 30 minutes left. Woohoo. So this next one for you guys is on the social science passage. I know we've been talking about it forever, but now we're at the point where we're finally talking about it. Okay. So this specific one, I forgot to tell it. Okay, well, it'll be the same passage that he brings up, but it's an economics passage. If you're like me, I mean, it's interesting, but I'm not necessarily a proclaimed econ major now, am I? So it might be on the same boat for you. However, there are some ways we can learn to be more interested and retain more information. So this is a short video. Let's go through it.
This is a social science passage on the reading section of the SAT. Let's do a quick survey step for this passage. What this means is I'm going to dash through the questions and mark them up where relevant, and this will inform my approach in the active reading, which will be another video. Doing this survey is a time management strategy. Looking at the questions first makes it possible for you to search and destroy on a passage like this. So, for example, if you identify a vocabulary and context question, on test day, you could answer that question as soon as you encounter it. And I'll model other opportunities like that as we go through. This is intended to be a quick step, to be clear. We want to figure out what we should be reading for and move on. I'm asking myself, can I do this now if I had to, or will I have to do this later? So, our strategy here is very simple. First, we want to read the blurb at the top of the passage, and then we're going to skim the questions for targets and map out the passage by marking it, and then during the active reading step you would tackle the passage in big chunks, doing the questions as you go. But for now, let's get started by reading the blurb. And the blurb is just this part up here, right? This passage is adapted from Ian King, Can Economics Be Ethical? The passage is all about that question, can economics be ethical? So with that blurb in our heads, let's start going through the questions themselves. Question 1, the main purpose of the passage is to blank. Okay, I got to read the whole passage to understand this one. I can't do it right now. Question 2, in the passage, the author anticipates which of the following objections to criticizing the ethics of free markets. So it's a question about what argument the author anticipates. When I read the passage, I'll look for that. I'll look for objections to criticizing the ethics of free markets. All right, question 3, which choice provides the best evidence for the answer to the previous question? So this question provides evidence for question 2, which makes my job easier. The answer to question 2 will be in one of these 4 places. And when I do question 2, I'm going to do question 3 at the same time. Question 4, as used in line 6, embraced most nearly means. All right, so this is a vocabulary question. And on test day, I might even do this question right now. So let's look for line 6, embraced. I'll pop over to the passage. What I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to mark it. There we go, embraced. Yeah, on test day, if I wanted to, I could read a line before, read a line ahead, and then use my vocabulary question strategies to answer it. But we'll get to those strategies in a later video. For now, all I want to do is just mark it and move on to question 5. So the main purpose of the 5th paragraph is to blank. Okay, this is a save it for later question for sure. We'll need to have read the entire 5th paragraph. All right, so I'll mark that paragraph, and if I feel like it, I can answer this question after I've read this paragraph. As used in line 49, clashes most nearly means. Okay, so that's another vocabulary question. If we wanted to, we could do that right now during this step. But for now, let's just mark the word clashes in line 49. I'm going to pop over to the passage. 50, 49, there's clashes. All right. And now we were on question 7. Which choice best supports the author's claim that there is common ground shared by the different approaches to ethics described in the passage? So this question is asking us to cite textual evidence to support a claim, but I feel like we're going to need to have the whole passage under our belt in order to do this one. Move on to question 8. The main idea of the final paragraph is that blank. All right, and that's just asking, what's the final paragraph about? Question 9, data in the graph about per pound coffee profits in Tanzania most strongly support which of the following statements? Let's look at the graph. Okay, there's the graph. Cool. This question is asking, what is the graph telling us? And note that it's a question about just the graph and not the passage. So if you were strapped for time, you could do this question now just by reading the graph. Now let's look at question 10. Data in the graph indicate that the greatest difference between per pound profits from fair trade coffee, blah, 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 occurred during which period? This is the same deal as question 9. We can do both of these questions just looking at the graph, right? It's asking us, what do the data tell us? And then finally, question 11, data in the graph provide the most direct support for which idea in the passage? Okay, so this means that you're going to have to understand the ideas at play in the passage before you can take this one on, because it's not just the data, it's the data and the ideas in the passage. So that's 4 out of 11 questions that if you needed to rack up some quick victories, you could do that right now. And just as importantly, by looking at these questions first, I've identified some of the ideas I'll want to look for during my active reading step. This was the survey step, and in the next video, you'll see me model an active reading.
Instead of having you guys watch another video, now that you guys have seen the questions, I'm going to send you guys the PDF, and then I'm also going to share my screen so we can read through, I'm going to read through the passage, and we're going to do the active reading step together so you guys can get some practice with me. So if you're like me and you're like, oh my gosh, economics, stop, dude. I'm already surrounded by too many econ majors. I get it. But, I mean, this passage is kind of cool. It's not just economics. It's like psychology too. So, let me pull it up. There we go. Okay. So here's the is economics ethical passage. So you guys will probably be downloading that right now. I'm going to share my screen. So we're going to read through it. It's kind of a big passage. And we're going to walk through it slowly just for the sake of we have a bunch of people here, but you guys are going to help me out. You guys are going to help me out with identifying certain parts that we go through as important. or if I should underline. Okay. Yay! Lo and behold. Okay. You guys see my screen? Yay. It's big. Okay. So we already know we're going to be answering this question. Can economics be ethical? Boom. Highlight. Does anyone want to take a stab at, we just looked through the questions, right? So let's refresh. If we wanted to right now, we could answer these last questions with the graph. Where is it? This is the graph. I don't want to add text. And that's already like a third of the questions. But the other stuff, not so much relying on the graph. Does anyone want to take a stab at some of the things that, as we just went through the questions, we should probably be looking for when we read? There's at least like 2 questions relating to the main idea. There's also a lot of supporting questions that you guys probably noticed to support your answer for the previous question. We're looking for objections, possible objections the author is going to be bringing up. Main purpose of the 5th paragraph, as well as the main idea of the final paragraph, the main idea of the passage. So you might actually save this one for last. Maybe. We also have a vocab question. We have like supporting evidence for the objections question. Vocab, support, and then the graph question. So boom, we already know what to look for. So let's go through it. Recent debates about the economy have rediscovered the question, is that right? Where right means more than just profits or efficiency. Some argue that because the free markets allow for personal choice, they are already ethical. Others have accepted the ethical critique and embraced corporate social responsibility. But before we can label any market outcome as immoral, notice we got a but here. So you guys are already reading this, and we already kind of have an idea of one of the questions. Remember, we looked through the questions, and we were like, this dude's going to be like, objections to my argument, boom, here we go. He already knows some people are going to be like, well, free markets allow for personal choice. They're already ethical. Some people have accepted the ethical critique and embraced corporate social responsibility. Boom. But before we can label any market outcome as immoral or sneer at economics who try to put a price on being ethical, we need to be clear on what we're talking about. Okay? So let's look back at that question. I think it was question 3. Actually, no, it's question 2. I'm stupid. Okay. So in the passage, the author anticipates which of the following objections to criticizing the ethics of free markets. A, Smith's association of free markets with ethical behavior still applies today. B, free markets are the best way to generate high profits, so ethics are a secondary consideration. C, free markets are ethical because they are made possible by devalued currency. I don't remember anything being brought up about devalued currency. D, free markets are ethical because they enable individuals to make choices. Okay, I'm going to give you guys a minute. Which one do you guys think it is? And we literally just barely read the passage, and we can already answer this. You guys got about like 30 seconds. Type in the chat which one you guys think it is. Am I going too fast? Do you guys need help on anything? Okay, Lisa says B. What else do you guys think is the answer? I think B is a little more favorable than the other options, but I think there's a better one. One more minute, you guys. All right, well, I'm going to read through the passage again so you guys can get a head start on it. Some argue that because the free markets allow for personal choice, they're already ethical. Others have accepted the ethical critique and embraced corporate social responsibility. But before we can label any market outcome as immoral or sneer at economics who try to put a price on being ethical, we need to be clear on what we're talking about. Okay. I would have answered D here. So we can already cancel out C because C is like, we didn't even talk about the value currency. A, we haven't read any of the supporting details yet about why the author feels like there's going to be these objections. And B, free markets are the best way to generate high profits, so ethics are a secondary consideration. So B, you might pick B. Why do you think I picked D? Or do you think my answer is right? What do you think?
Yeah, I'm just not. I'm still not entirely sure. It's a bit weird for me dealing with these passages and such.
Okay. I'll walk through why I think D as opposed to B. In this part that I highlighted from the first part, I specifically talked about like we're grappling with the question, is it right? The only time that we've come to question profits is with this question. However, he already knows that people are going to be like, free markets are already ethical, because if there's room for personal choice, then there's no need to rethink the idea of a free market. People can just choose what they want. There's no such thing as coercion or illusion of freedom. It's already ethical. And that's exactly what he says. He even says, others have accepted the ethical critique and embraced corporate social responsibility. So some people are just, they already know, okay, well, you might be right that free markets maybe aren't that ethical, but we're still trying to find ways to make corporate more responsible socially. But it's not so much talking about like the counter argument that free markets are it doesn't talk about that free markets are the best way to generate high profits. It's saying that some people already think the free market is ethical because they allow individuals to have a choice. He even says personal choice in the passage. Lisa, I know you said B. Totally not a bad guess at all, especially because it's a little confusing, I bet, in some parts. But does my answer here make sense for you? I hope it helps, my clarification. Yeah, it's better. Okay. I just want to make sure that one made sense. But totally, if I was not paying attention as well, I could totally answer B, right? because I see profits in the passage before. I'm like, okay, it's about something free markets profit, boom. But personal choice is the big key factor here. That's why it's D. Booyah. Which lines support this evidence? Okay, well, let's look exactly where they ask. 4 to 5, let's see. Some argue that because the free markets allow for personal choice, they're already ethical. Wow. I feel like we have our answer there, but let's check the other ones just in case. 7 to 10. But before we can label any market outcome as immoral or sneer at economics who try to put price on being ethical, we need to be clear on what we're talking about. This doesn't really talk about the market or free market or what that has to do with our first answer. So I'm starting to think it's A. And then these other two, okay, you notice how we looked for the answer in like the first 10 paragraphs or lines, sorry. Why do we have one for 52 and 54? I'm not saying it's not possible, okay? But we haven't even read this far, yet we already found the answer in this one. So why would I have to go all the way to 52 and 54? Okay, let's read it, okay, just in case. They try to trick you because maybe you'll look into the context of 54 and 55 and be like, oh, that kind of has to do with the answer I picked, but it's in a completely different part with a different context. So let's read it. When a finance official refuses to devalue a currency, see? Same. We had no idea what devalue a currency was, but we do remember it was one of the answers here. Look, we're like, what's devalue currency? Look, this is where they get you. If you're not paying attention to the way you survey questions and where to immediately look for stuff, you might pick this one and be like, oh my gosh, this one supports my answer for devalued currency. I was like, no, you can't do that. That's not the point. Because we explicitly talk about it right here in the first passages. Boom. So that's how they throw you off. They put these lines here that have no way relate to like your answer for the other one that you found in like the first 3 lines. And then you might pick it if you like misinterpreted the question. So boom. A is the automatic answer here without even looking at Smith, because we're not talking about Smith. You guys are probably going to look at this question again. If you answered this one, you're going to say, oh, this one talks about Smith. Okay, this must be right. But it's talking about anticipating objections. Very beginning of the passage. You don't have to read the rest of the crap about Adam Smith if you don't want to, right? Boom, you're done. Does that make sense for people? Here's another one that's kind of beginning at the start of the paragraph. Line 6, embraced. Let's go. For personal choice, they're already ethical. Others have accepted the ethical critique and embraced corporate social responsibility. Okay. So it's not a hug or lovingly held. You guys are probably going to be used. Like you guys are probably like looking at A and C like these are kind of similar because they are. So if you see those two, they're like really similar. It's probably not either of those two. So they didn't eagerly hug corporate social responsibility. So it's not C. It's not A either. So it's either B or D. Which one do you guys think it is? This one I think will be a little easier because they're both complete opposites, but in the context of the passage. Which one do you guys think it is? I'll give you guys like another minute. I'll be right back while you guys try to solve this question. Give me a second. All right, I'm back. I had to use the restroom quickly. Do you guys decide? Lisa says B, and in this case, B is correct. So in the context of the passage, right, it's assuming that people already started to use the like corporate responsibility as a part of their ethical critique to be better, right? So it is B. It's not reluctantly used because it's implying they jumped on something in response to a critique. So B is the answer. Good job, Leah. Good job, Lisa. Okay. All right. So the next question doesn't really apply until the 5th paragraph. And then we also have the graph. So I'm gonna give you guys some I'm gonna ask you guys what you guys want to do. We have the graph, and we also have the remainder of the passage. Do you guys want to practice your data analysis skills? Or do you guys want to practice reading through the passage and finding main ideas? Which skill do you guys think you need more? Any preference? If not, I mean, I think you guys have the passage part more than the data part. So I might just let you guys learn how to analyze the graph quickly. And then you guys can do the rest of the passage on your own, since we kind of went through a big chunk of it. Okay. Unless someone specifies otherwise, let's try the graph. So the graph is titled Regular Coffee Profits Compared to Fair Trade Coffee Profits in Tanzania. What are the two things being compared here on the axes? On the y-axis, that's the vertical one. That's straight, like that. Amount, US cents per pound. And then the bottom one, the X, that's year, so time. So we're seeing like the amount being charged per pound. And the two like variables are the fair trade coffee and the regular coffee. Regular coffee seems to be a lot lower, about 60 to 20 in that range, cents per pound. And then the fair trade coffee is consistently between like 120, 140. So we're going to estimate about 130 cents per pound. Okay, so we just totally read through that graph. Let's answer the questions. All right. Okay. Graph in the data in the graph about per pound coffee profits in Tanzania most strongly support which of the following statements. Okay. So the great thing about these is you can just look at the answer and then look in the graph and then just check if it's true. Okay. Fair trade coffee consistently earned greater profits than regular coffee earned. Okay. We look at it. Yeah, that's true. Let's look at the other ones. The profits earned from regular coffee did not fluctuate. That's wrong. As we can see, there was a bit of fluctuation for the regular coffee. So that's not true. Next one. Fair trade coffee profits increased between 2004 and 2006. No, it stayed about the same. So that's not true. Last one. Fair trade and regular coffee were earning equal profits. Okay. If this one's true, right? If fair trade coffee consistently earned more profits, why would D be true? Because it's saying that they're equal at some point. Yet you look at it. Yeah, no contest. Boom. We got one question done. Fair trade coffee consistently earned greater profits than the regular coffee. If you don't want to, if you trust your gut, and this is the only true one, you can go by way faster than me talking out loud. 10. Data in the graph indicates that the greatest difference between per pound profits from fair trade and those from regular coffee occurred between which periods? Let's look then. 2022, let's see. That is a pretty big difference. We see that happen like that. Okay, let's see. The difference, like the lowest difference, it's about like 22 to 130. Okay, let's see if there's bigger differences. 22 to 24, 2004, sorry. This one looks a lot lower because this one's like gradually decreasing, but this one's like just rock bottom. If you were me, I'd just put up 2002 and 2004 like immediately. Boom. Next question. If you doubt me, let's look at the other dates. The other dates are 2004 to 2005 and 2006 to 2008. So let's look. From this point, no, it's not as low as this point. And this one is probably like the more higher range of like regular copy profit. So it's not this either. It's this, 2002 to 2004. Boom. Last question. Data in the graph provides most direct support for which idea in the passage? We haven't read the passage, so this one's a little hard. Let's see. Acting on empathy can be counterproductive. Ethical economics is defined by character. Ethical economics is still possible. People fear losses more than they hope for gains. Okay. This might be actually a lot harder because this will require you to read the graph and have some understanding of the passage. So we might not be able to answer this, but for my homework for you guys tonight, aside from doing, looking through the other passages I gave you, see what is the connection you guys can identify with the graph as well as the passage, okay? So we can kind of see regular coffee, fair trade coffee, okay. See how this relates to what we should be looking for in the passage, okay? So that's gonna be for you guys to go through. But as you can see, we kind of like breeze through a lot of these just from reading carefully. A lot of these are asking for the same thing. Main idea, what does a word mean? What choice supports it? And yeah, so I'm gonna share my presentation for the last bit so we can get you guys in that WhatsApp group. And if you guys have any questions, of course, feel free to ask any of us. So as we conclude for today, here's some last minute tips for you guys to go over. I know it was a big presentation today. I'm sure you guys are tired. It's Monday. You don't want to be here. Totally get it. Some last things for you guys. Take those practice tests on the College Board. Khan Academy also finds these on the College Board, but College Board probably has the largest amount of practice tests you guys can use. You can also practice reading specifically or other parts of the SAT on Khan Academy. So there's a link there if you guys want to have the access to the same resources I sent you guys today, except it's facilitated by Khan Academy, and they have more in-depth notes, which I took inspiration from for today. Process of elimination is really helpful. As you guys can see, immediately knocked off some answers just on a whim because I used process of elimination. Some stuff just wasn't relevant to what we brought up today. So boom, makes your job easier. And just as a take care note, please take breaks from studying. I know I'm not encouraging that as helpful as I should be because we just took a 2-hour-long study session, but take breaks when you guys are doing your own independent studying. Just to reiterate some self-care, relax and don't cram before your exam. So that includes the day before. Sleep well, make sure you have your testing materials ready, pencils, ID. I know some testing centers charge, but you should be able to check that information prior before you actually take your test. The main ones are just your ID, pencils, erasers. Ask if maybe your calculator, of course. Exam day. Eat a good breakfast and also bring a snack. I personally recommend don't bring a banana because the banana gets all brown. Personal experience. Bring an orange or an apple or mango, any of those. Something that doesn't decay or won't squash easily. So here's our exit question for today. I just want to ask how you guys feel about the reading test now that you guys have gone through how to use Khan Academy, how does Khan Academy help you, and have like real passages to work with now. So how do you guys feel now about the writing test than you did before? Hopefully more confident than before. Okay, well, that concludes the session. I'm gonna stop sharing and I'm gonna send you guys the bit.ly link for our SAT prep. As I'm aware, we have some new people here today. So you guys can join, and you guys, since you're studying for the SAT, can ask us any questions through this WhatsApp. Here we go. So everyone just check the chat, click that link if you guys are using the WhatsApp to kind of just ask us questions or meet other people also studying for the SAT. We share resources. We might download this presentation if people request to have you guys look back on some of the stuff if you forgot something, but we do have the passages in the chat as well to download so you guys can work on it on your own. So with that being said, that's the end of our session today. I hope you guys got something meaningful out of today, and hopefully you guys will also start using Khan Academy to help you guys study. And yeah, if you guys have no other questions, you guys are free to leave. Thank you guys. Oh wait, okay, a question not so related to what we're seeing. Where can I find the Zoom recording to download and consult it later? Great question. So we will make all of the recordings public on the YouTube channel after we're all done with this series. So expect by the end of the summer to the beginning of fall, September, where we'll upload all of this information for you to go over. But it will take a bit of time. So we obviously encourage you to come to as many sessions as you can. If there's no other questions, you guys are free to leave. Thank you guys.